Hello. In 49 BC, a Roman army marched south from the Alps and crossed the Rubicon, a shallow river which marked the northern border of the territory controlled by the city of Rome. The army was led by a young general called Julius Caesar, and when he crossed the Rubicon he ignited a series of civil wars that led eventually to the overthrow of the Roman Republic and the establishment of the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar could be the ultimate case study for the view that history is made by great men. He extended the borders of Roman power to the English Channel, introduced political reforms that echo down to the present day, and left accounts of it all that are considered high points of Latin literature. He is also famous for the manner of his death, murdered on the steps of the Senate in one of the most notorious political assassinations in history. But was Caesar a power-crazed tyrant, or a visionary statesman willing to do whatever it took to see through much-needed reforms? With me to discuss Julius Caesar are Maria Wyke, Professor of Latin at University College London, Chris Pellin, Regius Professor of Greek at the University of Oxford, and Catherine Steele, Professor of Classics at the University of Glasgow. So we got the boobs out of the way. I would like to start this again, but it's live. Okay, Maria. Caesar lived in a period historians call the Late Republic. What was the state of Rome at that time?
Well, Caesar was actually born in about 100 years before Christ, so in fact not quite so young when he crossed the River Rubicon, but he was growing up and maturing in the 90s and the 80s, and that was perhaps the best of times and the worst of times for a man of his gifts and his ambitions for power and fame to live. It was the worst of times because he was born into a family that found themselves on the wrong side of a continuing struggle in the late Republic between the traditional ruling aristocracy and the people. In his first 20 years, he would have lived through violent clashes and sustained wars between Romans and non-Romans, and even between
non-Romans,
Romans.
you don't mean in Rome. Non-Romans around.
I mean people who lived in Italy but did not have Roman citizenship.
Which was most of them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Rome, as such, is a relatively small part of the Italian peninsula. But these wars and these violent struggles are taking place because there is a desire to gain access to the power and the wealth and the privilege that comes with being a citizen of the Roman Empire. And when he was about 12, a general and leader of the aristocratic party marched on Rome. When he was 17, that general became a dictator and attempted to restore the power of the Senate and slaughtered his enemies. And Caesar was vulnerable because he was one of that man's relatives of one of that man's enemies, I should say.
We're still talking about the Republic at this time, rather than about the Empire. And the Empire begins after the death of Caesar, although it might look like an empire before then. What sort of power was Rome? What power did he have at this time?
Well,
it was a state in the peninsula, and what else?
Well, one of the reasons why it was the best of times for someone like Caesar is because of the opportunity to be a general in the Roman world, because Rome was now also an empire. It was a republican empire, possessed provinces in other parts of the world. During this period, wars were being fought from Spain right over to Syria, from wars with the Germans in the north down to Africans in the south.
This period being what? Because you've got to be specific here, because he comes in at a particular moment and does particular things.
Yes.
So what is this period?
Well, the period, as I mentioned, the 90s and the 80s.
We're back when he's 10 to 20.
Yes.
Right,
so in the period before he takes action, there are already
they're fighting
wars.
to get an empire in different parts of what we now call Europe, even though they were only a small part of what we now call Italy.
Yes, and they were growing and growing, and they already had provinces in, for example, in southern France. So they didn't possess they had allies in Italy. They had people in Italy who were not citizens, but they also had provinces. So Rome is expanding and expanding, giving citizenship out across the Mediterranean.
So briefly, what impact did this empire have on this state? So you have a smallish state in the peninsula with empire burgeoning.
Yes.
What impact did it have on the feeling that that state had about itself?